Hello and welcome to Money Lion MMA coverage of UFC Vegas 56, presented to you by Nick, myself, and Jose. We are going to be discussing the UFC Fight Night coming up on June 4th, 2022 at Las Vegas, Nevada. The card opens with Felice Herrig fighting Karolina Kowalkiewicz, then followed by Alonzo Menifield versus Askar Mozharov. Then we've got Karine Silva fighting Poliana Botelho. Then we've got Michael Trizano matching up with Lucas Almeida. The co-main event of this event is going to be Dan Ige versus Movsar Evloev. And the headline of UFC Vegas 56 is Alexander Volkov versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik.
All right, and that brings us to our first fight of the night. It's Felice Herrig versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. The betting favorite for this is Felice Herrig, and she is the betting favorite at a minus 136, while Karolina Kowalkiewicz is the betting underdog at plus 108. Both right now are coming off multiple losses in their career. Karolina, she has lost 5 in a row, and her last win is actually to Felice Herrig. And even then, that was a split decision, so it could have gone either way. And you could argue that she could be, maybe she should have been on a 6-fight losing streak, but pretty much, especially from that knockout from Jessica Andrade, Karolina has not been the same. The Polish fighter has kind of fallen off, I believe. And Felice Herrig, she has been inactive for almost 2 years now. She's coming off a major knee surgery. She's been battling knee problems for a while. So that being said, she has a layoff, and it's due to an injury. And that surgery can be we'll see how she's going to do bouncing back from that surgery, Nick.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this one plays out too. They're definitely two fighters that aren't necessarily on the end of their runs here in the UFC, but they're certainly not at the beginning of their runs either, when they both had some great win streaks going earlier in their careers that were ended up kind of ending short in early in their opinion. I do agree that Karolina does seem to have fallen off maybe a little bit since that win against Felice Herrig a few years ago in 2018. But she has fought some of the best fighters in the women's MMA, from Andrade, Michelle Waterson, Alexa Grasso. I mean, she fights some of the top tier talent and took them all to decision. She almost never got taken out early in those fights. I guess Andrade did get a TKO in the first round. But otherwise, it's pretty tough to take Karolina out of these fights. So I don't necessarily think she's declining in the sense, because she's been fighting such high tier fighters. I understand that Felice Herrig has also seen some good talent, having also fought Michelle Waterson. Both of these fighters having lost to Michelle Waterson. And Verna Jandiroba is also a pretty good fighter. So not a bad loss for Felice Herrig by any means. Like you said, definitely coming off of a layoff here. It'll be interesting to see how she can recover for those injuries. But to me, in the end, Karolina is the better striker here. That pretty much is the reason she was able to get that split decision victory in their first matchup. And I do kind of anticipate the fight playing out in a similar match, or in a similar fashion this time.
That's fair reasoning, Nick. For this fight, I lean towards Felice Herrig. The reason being is, though she is coming back from the injury, she was pretty much on a tear for a bit. She had a 4-fight win streak between 2016 and 2000 and in December of 2017. And during that win, she also happened to beat Alexa Grasso. Granted, Alexa Grasso just got into the UFC, but since then, she's been on a tear, and she's even gone on to beat the Polish fighter Karolina herself. And I think since that fight, from the last Felice Herrig, and especially the Jessica Andrade fight for Karolina, I think she's really, I think she's kind of gone downhill. There's a lot of fights where she just almost got outclassed, losing by unanimous decisions multiple times. And ultimately getting armbarred in the first round by Jessica Penne at UFC 265 in August of 2021. Same thing, with Felice Herrig, though, too, since that split decision loss to Karolina. She did lose the unanimous decision to Michelle Washington, but that was also back when Michelle Washington was also doing fairly well. And then she herself has also fallen victim to a first round submission armbar to Verana Jandiroba back at UFC 252 of August of 2020, and she's not been active since. She has been training, though. She trains out here in Illinois, and I know she's still been active, just not on the radar. So I think she's going to come in fresh. She's going to come in with power. She has a 36% significant strike rate, which is just slightly below the 39% strike rate for Karolina. That being said, I wouldn't even be surprised if she tries to use her defense and just try to hold her down and just take away Karolina's striking. That being said, I am going to go for this fight with the betting favorite, Felice Herrig, who's the betting favorite again by minus 136, and Karolina is the betting underdog at plus 108. So there you have it. I got Felice Herrig. Nick has Karolina.
Yep, I got Karolina, and you might as well mark it down Karolina by decision. And now on to the second fight of the night. We've got one of my most favorite and intriguing fights coming up on June 4th. We've got Askar Mozharov fighting Alonzo Menifield. This is going to be so fascinating to see, Jose. Askar is getting his UFC debut, listed as the top fighter. In Ukraine, he's listed as a heavyweight and a middleweight because he started out as a middleweight and has gained a lot of muscle mass and weight since. But pretty much overall, the best fighter in Ukraine, getting his UFC debut. He is one of those one-round wonder fighters. His last 5 fights ending in the first round. The first of those 5 back in that 2019, he was knocked out, but the rest of the 4, he's on a 4-fight win streak of knockouts in the first round, and one of those in last year, 2021, being a bare knuckle boxing match, which is interesting. But that being said, not the same as MMA. He's fighting a guy, Atomic Alonzo, who is listed as the favorite, minus 174 on FanDuel to Mazarov's underdog, plus 136, which I think makes sense when you've got a guy that's seen some top-end UFC competition, such as Paul Craig, OSP, and William Knight. He was successful in beating Paul Craig via knockout in the first round, but was then further knocked out by OSP later on in the second round 2 years ago. So it is kind of an up and down experience for Atomic Alonzo when he's fighting that top end UFC competition. But I do think it's a little bit crazy to think that Mazarov's just going to be able to come in here and wipe up the floor with a seasoned UFC veteran in the first round, as he has with these Ukrainian fighters.
Yeah, Nick. No, I agree. I'm actually excited to see Askar make his UFC debut. This man, I want to see what he's about. This guy has a crazy record. Just by looking at the method, just like a lot of his wins, even losses that he has, are all within the first round. So this guy, fights for him don't last long. He only has like very few fights that have even made it to the second round. So I'm interested to see, how the rule sets he's been under over in Europe, and just from his experience. I want to know like his level of competition. I really don't know much about his competitors who he's beaten in the past. Dude looks huge though, staying at 6'3". He's fairly young. He's only 27. I believe I can see him being just extremely strong and difficult. But again, it's his history really, I mean, right? His last 3 fights, KO first round, TKO first round, TKO first round. And it just goes beyond just a lot of fights ending in the first round. That being said, then too, look at Alonzo. Then he's a little more he's more diverse in terms of who he's seen and his experience. Definitely, he has higher level experience in the UFC for sure, in the LFA, and as well as his first pro fight being for Bellator. He won in the first round via TKO. So Yeah, this guy's no joke. He does have his losses. You know, he got KO'd by Ovince St. Preux back at UFC Fight Night 176 in 2020. So these bigger guys that are very technical scare me. I don't know if Askar is going to be technical like that. I think this guy is going to be like a muscle man coming forward, and him not being active for a while, this kind of shakes me up a bit, Nick.
Yeah, honestly, I don't blame you up for being a little bit off put by that. You know, in the end, I think Askar provides a massive concern in the first couple minutes of the fight. If he can clip Atomic Alonzo with a couple hooks, couple kicks, maybe get that early knockout that he's so used to doing. But to me, you know, outside of the first 4 or 5 minutes of this fight, if Menifield isn't unconscious on the pavement, then at this point, I think Menifield's going to be able to outcondition and outrun Mozharov. We've just never seen Mozharov have to fight longer than 8 minutes in the ring with any of this competition that he's seen. And I just don't think stepping in the ring with a seasoned UFC veteran is going to provide him much support when it gets to being in the later second and third rounds. You know, I was initially thinking that this fight would end inside the distance, but the more I looked into it, the more I thought, you know, honestly, no, I think Alonzo's best strategy here would be to stay the distance and control the fight in round one and just continue to stay on the feet and use his 3.86 strikes landed per minute to slowly slice and dice Askar and just show him that he's not just you're not going to be able to come in here and just knock out these UFC veterans in the first 2 or 3 minutes of these fights. So, you know, Askar might be able to have a come up in the UFC for sure. Like you mentioned, he's only 27. So this by no means that he's going to be bad and he's not going to be able to make a UFC run. I'm just not sure that it's going to be the first time, his first chance against a seasoned veteran like Atomic Alonzo. So I'm definitely leaning Alonzo on this fight. And like I said, at first I was thinking inside the distance, but now I'm actually leaning towards Alonzo by decision.
Yeah, Nick, I like that pick very much. Like you said, Alonzo has a proven track record of making it at least to the end of 3 rounds. Askar does not. Askar does have good takedown game and grappling skills as well. And I don't know if that's going to worry me much of him trying to get a submission. He does have 6 submission wins on his record, but I'm not too worried about his ground game. You know, Alonzo has 83% takedown defense. I'm very well sure he's gonna work his way out of those and use his wrestling defense, whether to sprawl, circle out, and just avoid going to the ground. I honestly think this is going to be a stand-up brawl. I think it's just going to be. I do think Alonso is going to avoid any takedowns, and I think Askar is going to be challenged for sure, being in the big leagues. That being said, I think it's just going to be two guys throwing haymakers in front of each other, and I do like the decision. I do like your way of going with the decision. That is definitely a smart move because he has that proven track record with his cardio. But I think it is going to be smash and bang in front of each other. So I'm leaning towards Alonzo Menifield as well, via TKO or KO within the 3 rounds for sure. All right, Nick. And that brings us to our next fight of the night. It's Karine Silva versus Poliana Botelho. Karine Silva is making her UFC debut after coming off phenomenal wins. She is coming off a submission guillotine win in the second round off Dana White's Contender Series, while Poliana Botelho is coming off 2-fight losing streak right now. Her last fight was a loss via split decision to Luna Karolina at last year in May. And her last win happened in April of 2019 to Lauren Mueller via unanimous decision. This is an exciting fight. I'm excited to see Silva make her UFC debut. She is the betting favorite at minus 122, while Poliana Botelho is the betting underdog at minus 104. What do you think of that, Nick? It's you have the more experienced UFC vet opening up as the betting underdog. This is something we've talked about that's been happening recently over the past few weeks in the UFC.
Yeah, no kidding, Jose. That is fascinating. Botelho hasn't fought necessarily like a full list, huge crop of the best female fighters in the UFC, but she's fought some pretty big names. Cynthia Calvillo being probably the biggest one. Granted, that fight was the one fight that she wasn't able to win. That was a round one finish. So no, definitely didn't go Poliana's direction, but she has fought some of the top end talent and brought it to decisions in the UFC. So it is fascinating to see her come out here as an underdog, but in this case, it's a close underdog, so it's not like she's that big of an underdog. And regardless, I think for a good reason. I think Silva's a fascinating fighter in that she just doesn't put out much striking volume, and she kind of just continues to push forward and solely just go to grappling and try and get you to the fence, get you to the ground, and go for submissions. It's quite fascinating to watch, really. I mean, her contender series win against Yan Kui. I mean, that Jan brought that to the ground, and Karine did not mind, and she just continued to put out submission after submission try, and eventually it worked. Got the round two guillotine choke. Look, I think Botelho. At first, I was thinking like, how is Botelho the underdog here? She has 80% takedown defense. This is just she seems to have the stand up advantage. So how is she going to lose this fight? But in the end, I mean, she was clearly still grappled to the ground by Cynthia Calvillo. She was grappled to the ground by Jillian Roberts. And I just don't think she's going to be able to stop Silva. Even if she stops Silva 80% of the time, there's still a couple times squeaking in between where Silva does get her to the ground and gets in 5 to 6 submission attempts. And I think one of those could come through here. So I'm heavily leaning Silva here, I think, Jose.
Yeah, Nick, that's a great pick. Yes, Poliana Botelho, she has 6 TKOs on her record. And that being said, only one of them is actually happened in the UFC. So that's not really saying much. She's 3-3 right now in the UFC. And Silva, she is coming off more killer grinds. Like she hasn't shown much yet in the UFC, but I think this is a great matchup for her to make her official UFC debut outside Dana White's Contender Series. So I'm excited. I'm not worried about the matchup necessarily in terms of physical size. Poliana Botelho is taller at 5'8", while Silva is 5'5". They both, however, do have a 6-7 inch identical reach. So I don't think those fists hitting the faces is going to be a problem whatsoever. Uh, that and I do think in this case the younger fighter being Silva, I think she wants to make a name for herself. She wants to prove a point, and I think someone like Botelho is a great opponent to showcase her skills. That being said, I think Karolina Silva will win this fight within the 3 rounds via KO or TKO.
Fair enough. I was actually thinking it was. That's funny you go TKO. I was leaning Silva by submission, um, but I think either way is possible here. It'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. But regardless, I don't see it going the distance. So Silva by submission for me. On to the third last fight of the night. We've got Mike Trizano versus Lucas Almeida. Trizano being the minus 265 favorite against Almeida's underdog plus 200. Jose, this will be an interesting fight. Trizano is coming off of a decision loss. Lots of decision fights in general for Trizano. He's got really good conditioning, clearly showing that he can take fights the distance if they need to. But he also has multiple knockout wins under his belt. So he's one of those dynamic fighters where you can understand why he's the favorite in this case. Almeida, his only UFC relative experience would have been his Contender Series loss to Daniel Zellhuber, in which it was a unanimous decision loss. So not too great for Almeida, but I do think the fight was still relatively close. Almeida got a lot of strikes in that fight, and just in the end lost some ground control grappling time, and I think that was one of the main catalysts to him getting the unanimous decision loss there. And but after round one of that fight, I'd argue that Almeida was winning. So if he can keep his conditioning up and take the ability to go to the second round and third round strong, he might be able to step it up and compete with Trizano here, because I think Trizano is one of those guys where he's not as big of a knockout threat. He has a couple knockouts under his belt, but he's not going to be the kind of guy that you expect to see with the big, powerful strikes, knocking guys out. So without a doubt, no matter which direction you're leaning on, which fighter is going to win this, I think no matter what, you're betting on the over 2.5 rounds for this fight. I highly doubt either of these guys are going to be knocking out one another. The one thing I might, be concerned about is Almeida does have some great grappling skills background. If he's able to take this weight cut, and which is another thing that I think is pretty major in this fight. Almeida being the 155.5 pound champion in the previous promotion he worked at. I think him dropping down to 145 for this fight's going to be interesting. So I'm definitely hesitant and waiting on anything I do with this fight as well, outside of that over 2.5 rounds bet, until I'm seeing Almeida on the scale, looking like he was able to get through that weight cut strong, and not lose too much from that grueling 10-pound cut.
Yeah, Nick, that's a great point you make there. Lucas Almeida is coming in as the lightweight champion for his former organization before coming into the UFC. That cut is an excellent point. I do want to see him on the scale. He does have a 100% finish rate throughout his career, which is phenomenal. So he is going to be coming in the big guy. You don't really see him maybe finishing, getting that KO, TK, or anything like that, or even a submission. That being said, I don't know. I have to see him on the scale. If he looks great, I'd be scared for Michael Trizano. That being said, Michael Trizano does have experience, but he still has a lot to prove still in the UFC. Trizano only has a 34% finish rate, and he is coming off his unanimous decision loss to Hakeem Dawodu at UFC Fight Night 200, Hermansson versus Strickland. That was earlier this year in February. He lost via unanimous decision, so he needs to play a smart game to win this because Lucas Almeida is dangerous, and it's just he does have that loss though that came to the contenders that happened in the contender series. But yeah, that was also to Daniel Zellhuber, who that dude's an undefeated, that's an undefeated phenom kid right now that is making waves in the UFC as well. So no shame in there. It was two undefeated guys versus each other. Someone had to take the L there, and it was Lucas Almeida, and it's just unfortunate it happened to him at the Dana White's contender series. So this is actually a big fight, one that's I think it's going to be exciting. Michael Trizano, I think the odds are right in making him the betting favorite in this case. But I do see it's just based off his experience alone. He does have some KOs and some submissions on his record, but I'm not worried. I don't think it's gonna end up being that. I can see Mike Trizano pushing Lucas Almeida all 3 rounds and trying to pick up a unanimous decision. That being said, yeah, I'm gonna go with Michael Trizano on this, and say that he's gonna win via unanimous decision. That being said, though, if Lucas Almeida is looking phenomenal and great, I wouldn't, I can see why people would be, I can see the money line changing going his way, just because he does have that high finish rate and he is hungry. And again, that loss that happened off the contender series, that was also unanimous decision. So Mike Trizano is going to have to play a game plan like that, where he's going to have to mostly win via unanimous decision and outsmart Lucas Almeida.
Right. Yeah. I think those are some fair points. So sounds like Jose's got Trizano. I'm definitely leading Almeida. Like I said, dependent on that scale performance. I think Almeida can come out here. My final bet will be Almeida, and he will be my underdog of the week, provided he weighs in fine at 145.
All right, Nick, and that brings us to the co-main event of the night. This is one of the more exciting fights, I think, on the card. Definitely one of the more exciting fights in the featherweight division. It's Dan Ige, who's ranked number 10, versus Movsar Evloev, who's ranked number 13 right now. Dan Ige is the underdog at plus 310, while Evloev is the betting favorite at minus 440. Evloev, I'm excited. Him at 15-0. This guy fights just like Khabib. This guy has heavy grappling, and he has 3 KOs and 4 submissions on his record, and he's currently riding a 5-fight UFC win streak, while Dan Ige is coming off 2 losses to Josh Emmett and Zhang Songyang, the Korean Zombie. Both unanimous decision. He has not won since UFC Fight Night 187, Edwards versus Muhammad, back last year of March of 2021. He won. He had a phenomenal first round KO to Gavin Tucker. But since then, he's been on the wrong end of these decision losses. He's not been able to rack up a win. This is an interesting one. I'm excited for this matchup, Nick.
Yeah, same here, Jose. I've been a pretty big Dan Ige fan. I think ever since 2020 when he beat Edson Barboza with that split decision, I think he really showed that he has the ability to take on and beat the top competition in the UFC. Then, obviously, like you mentioned, he was on the wrong side of a couple decision losses almost in a row. Granted, some of the top UFC talent like Calvin Kattar, the Korean Zombie, some very tough guys to lose to. But then, also having lost to Josh Emmett, that's a pretty good fighter to lose to. But at the same time, like you said, if you can't take it through the 3 rounds and win these decision fights, then it does start to question whether you're able to keep up with some of the top young fighters that come in the UFC, like Movsar Evloev. I mean, he's 28 years old, he's 15-0, and he's a minus 400 favorite as a co-main in the UFC Fight Night. That's just not very common for a guy this young to be such a heavy favorite against a guy that I wouldn't necessarily quite call him a legend in the UFC by any means, but Ige is a pretty big name in the UFC. So that's very fascinating. I think Evloev does have that Khabib aspect to him, but I don't necessarily want to call him by any means a Khabib clone. He's only been able to win his 5 UFC fights so far by decision, one of them being split when he fought Nick Lentz. That's a pretty impressive win nonetheless, even if it's by split decision, but he hasn't shown the ability to truly submit anyone in the UFC yet. So it is fascinating to me what's going to happen with this fight. Will he be able to get Ige to the ground? I think, yes, that's pretty likely, but will he be able to submit him? That I'm not quite so sure about. Ige's never once been submitted in his UFC career. In fact, Ige's only ever lost by decision. So it's very fascinating to me that we've got a guy that's only ever won in the UFC by decision against a guy that's only ever lost in the UFC by decision. So it does make me want to lean towards this fight, at least seeing a decision and go to the judges. It's just a matter of who in the first 15 minutes there, who is going to win on the ground. And if it gets to the ground, which I likely think it will, with a four takedown average per 15 minutes, Evloev is one of those guys who's going to strike and he's going to bring you to the ground. It's just a matter of what can you do while you're down there.
Yeah, Nick, I do see Evloev being pretty dominant when it comes to the grappling exchange. Both fighters stand at 5'7", while Mosfar Evloev has a small one inch reach advantage. I think that's going to come in handy when he's on his feet. A lot of the punches you'll be throwing will be to set him up for a quick takedown. This guy is quick, explosive, and pretty crafty. I was watching one of his fights earlier, and he's a grappler for sure. He does not like to let go, no matter how uncomfortable you're putting him in. And even if it looks like, he's getting a little sloppy, he's just going to grab a wrist. He's going to grab an ankle. Anything, he's going to get a hold of you and make you uncomfortable and put pressure on. Yeah, he has that average 4 takedowns per 15 minutes. That is, yeah, he's going to be pressing forward nonstop, putting top heavy pressure and just come in like a bull and just want to take you down and keep you there. Dan Ige has a 1.35 takedown advantage himself. That being said, yeah, I don't think he's going to be landing much of the takedowns in this. He does have a 57% takedown defense. But that being said, also, Mosfar Evloev is the dominant fighter here. He has a 63% takedown defense. I think Mosfar is going to dictate this match when he closes the distance. I think he's going to, just pretty much try to smash him to just try to smash to victory is how I see it. It is no question why he is the betting favorite by huge, minus 440. It's one of those cases where, I would love to see Dan Ige, come out of nowhere and just get a quick knockout again. That'd be so cool to see. But it is, again, you don't want to compare him to Khabib, like you said. I understand that, but is just this guy is, I would even argue I think his striking might be better than Khabib's. There are some of those guys coming in from that region that fight similar to Khabib, but with better hands. And this guy could be someone. I'm glad he's in the 13th. He's getting a crack at a guy who's just at ranked number 10. So I would love to see him how he does with other guys within the top 10. So that being said, I am going to go probably via unanimous decision for Evloev.
Yeah, Jose, I'm glad you actually brought up the striking aspect too, because that's not to be overlooked. I think Evloev, he's putting out 4.32 strikes per minute in his UFC fights. And granted, not all of these guys are massive top end UFC talents, but Nicholas and Hakeem Dawodu are some good wins to have that both went to decision. We've gotten a lot of time to see Evloev in the ring. These aren't stats just based off of a few minutes, a few short rounds. We've got 15 rounds of fights here to deal with, and he's putting out more strikes volume than Ige, more takedown volume, more submission volume. I just think in the end, Evloev is going to win this fight one way or the other. I think I do agree that it will go to decision, but at some point you just have to wonder, will Evloev get that submission victory? I don't think he's going to ride out his entire career as someone who rides on decision wins. When is he going to break through with his first rear naked choke or his first armbar? And it just makes you wonder if he's going to get it against Dan Ige. So you know what? I think I'm going to make it a little bit bold here, and I'm going to go as far as to say Evloev by submission. He's going to end his first UFC fight in his career before the 15-minute mark.
Yeah, Nick, that's a great pick. I'm really happy you went with the win via submission on your side, and I via decision on my side. Dan Ige, he's a tough guy. I don't see Evloev winning via TKO or KO. That being said, that's a bet I would almost stay away from. Dan Ige has his 3 losses were to knockout specialists, but they were all via unanimous decision. So that's saying that he can definitely take those heavy hands from the top of the featherweight division. I mean, he got Josh Emmett, knockout artist. You got the Korean Zombie, knockout. You got Kelvin Kattar, also knockout artist. All these guys are known for their heavy hands. The Korean Zombie also has phenomenal submission skills. But again, all 3 fighters that he's lost to have one thing in common. They have hands that can put you out to sleep with one hit. And he's shown that he can go the distance. 5 rounds with Kelvin Kattar, 5 rounds with the Korean Zombie, and 3 rounds with Josh Emmett. He can make he can make the final rounds without being put to sleep. So yeah, he can take heavy hands, and I don't advise going towards Evloev and putting him out as well. I would, definitely go the route of unanimous decision or submission.
Now for the main event of UFC Vegas 56, June 4th, 2022. In Las Vegas, Nevada, we've got Alexander Volkov matching up against Jairzinho, Rozenstruik, 2 of the top 10 heavyweight fighters of the UFC. Volkov coming in at a minus 166 favorite. Rozenstruik a plus 130 underdog. Volkov right now is ranked the number 8 heavyweight, and Rozenstruik is ranked the number 9. This is a fascinating fight between 2 guys ranked very closely in the top 10. They've both been coming off some saddening losses on their ends, with Rozenstruik having recently fought Curtis Blades and losing that fight via decision, and Volkov having lost a very early submission loss to Tom Aspinall back when the UFC was brought to London. So either way, these guys are looking to rebound off of those losses. But in the end, I think everybody kind of knows how this can play out. We've seen Volkov fight Derek Lewis in the past. We've seen Volkov fight some of the top strikers in the UFC, also like Cyril Gane, and come up unsuccessful. Jairzinho Rozenstruik himself being one of the heaviest hands in the heavyweight division, with only one debatingly having a stronger strike would be Derek Lewis and, of course, Francis. He's lost himself to Francis, a very quick first round, 22nd knockout. He's also lost to Gane. And obviously, as previously mentioned, that most recent Curtis Blades decision loss. But Rozenstruik has shown multiple times his hands are the real deal, and not many human beings on the planet can absorb a punch from this man in the ring and stay conscious. He's able to beat Augusto Sakai, Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem, Andrei Arlovsky. The names continue to pile up. On men, he is absolutely torched with his fists and knocked them out cold in the ring. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen here. Volkov has a pretty significant size advantage in that he's 5 inches taller and he's got a 2 inch advantage on the reach over Rozenstruik. So to me, this fight could very much play out similarly to the Derek Lewis fight that went almost the full distance. And at the very end, Derek Lewis was able to score a knockout to win against Volkov in 2018. So this I could see really going either way, Jose. What do you think?
Yeah, Nick, this is definitely one of the more exciting fights also of the night. The heavyweight collisions, Volkov, well experienced, well rounded in stand up game. Jairzinho Rozenstruik as well. Phenomenal kickboxing history. Both of them phenomenal stand up fighters. Rozenstruik has no submission, so I'm not afraid of this really taking much place on the ground. And even if it did, and Volkov was in the bottom position, I'm not worried. Look at Fabricio Verdum, the former heavyweight champion, some of the best jiu-jitsu artist ever to be in the UFC. He got submissions over legendary Cain Velasquez and Fedor Emelianenko, heavyweight legend. And Alexander Volkov was able to survive his guard and just able to make a good combo and knock him out. That being said as well, Alexander Volkov, you've mentioned, has been knocked out himself by Derek Lewis. But let's not forget that entire fight, Alexander Volkov was cruising to victory. He ended up losing to Derek Lewis last minute with just a few seconds left of the match, but that was just a Hail Mary by Derek Lewis. There was 11 seconds left of that match, and that was just a Hail Mary punch Derek Lewis threw, and it just happened to put out Alexander Volkov. I think if Alexander Volkov would have just kept his distance and rounded out, like walked around or something, and just killed time, he would have definitely won via unanimous decision, not split, unanimous decision. But Jairzinho Rozenstruik, he's been on a similar end to that as well, to like Derek Lewis. For example, Alistair Overeem, he has phenomenal kickboxing history as well. He's a former Pride champion, Strikeforce. He's done his thing. He had a chance to be a UFC champion twice himself, and he was cruising to victory. He was going to win via unanimous decision against Jairzinho Rozenstruik back at UFC Fight Night, ESPN 7, Overeem versus Rozenstruik in 2019. And with literally 4 seconds left, this is the fifth round, 4 minutes and 56 seconds went into that match. And Rozenstruik was on his way to a unanimous loss to Alistair Overeem. He was just a dominant fighter, just like Volkov was against Derek Lewis. And Jairzinho Rozenstruik just stepped forward and did a Hail Mary hook. And man, he cracked Alistair Overeem and busted his mouth open. Like you can see those photos of his lip being torn apart. And the ref stopped the match right there, and he beat Alistair Overeem via KO with 4 seconds left of that match. And then again, he got followed up and got destroyed himself, though, in 20 seconds by Francis Ngannou. So I guess what comes around goes around. But he has been on a win-loss since. And a lot of his losses have come to the bigger guys, though. Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gane, and Curtis Blades. These guys, they have power and they have wrestling. Volkov, I think he'd be more comfortable taking this fight to the ground, but he's also too smart and just too experienced to make it a sloppy fight. I mean, you're talking about Alexander Volkov. This guy is tall. This guy's staying at 6'7", while Jairzinho Rozenstruik is staying at 6'2". And not only that, the Russian fighter Volkov has a 2-inch reach advantage. He's going to be smart. He has phenomenal kickboxing that works well for him in MMA. He sets up. He has great upper hooks. That's how he put out for Fabricio Verdum. And for someone who's tall like him, those upper hooks are not as easy to get because you have to get underneath the chin. And he's for how tall he is, that's not something you'd see a lot unless he's going against someone taller than him. But he can land it against a lot of people that are shorter than him. He has power and he's smart. If he's learned anything from his experience with Derek Lewis, and if he's watched Jairzinho Rozenstruik on how he did against Alistair Overeem, I think this should be a victory via unanimous decision for Alexander Volkov. Again, Jairzinho Rozenstruik does have a puncher's chance. Like he definitely has that. But if Alexander Volkov implements a smart game plan, he can win via points, unanimous decision.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of leaning towards what you're going on there with the unanimous decision ideas. I just think at this point, Volkov is still able to put out the volume with 4.83 strikes landed a minute to win these rounds individually. Obviously, this is a 5-round fight, and I think he's going to be able to go into the 4th and the 5th championship rounds up a round or two. Obviously, Rozenstruik isn't the kind of guy who's looking to win a round, win a second round and get a decision win. He's just looking on in there, go in there and just throw the strikes, throw the fists, and get a big knockout if he can. This man has one decision win in his career. Rozenstruik is not going to go in there and get a decision win. Volkov, on the other hand, is going to be more calculated. Although he has plenty knockouts on his belt, I just don't think he's going in there expecting to knock out Rozenstruik. And I think he does have the ability to stay on the edge and use his size and reach difference advantage to keep Rozenstruik on the edge. He's already been there, done that. Obviously, you detailed how Volkov's been knocked out by Derek Lewis and how Jairzinho's done the same thing to Overeem, and that's fine. Volkov's seen it happen. He's been there, done that, and I think he's going to learn from those mistakes and not let it happen again. This is a pretty big fight for both of the guys in terms of where they're at in their careers. I think the loser of this fight falls out of the top 10 of the heavyweight division and is definitely facing a pretty strong uphill battle to get back into an area where they can fight top 10 fighters again. So, one of these guys taking a loss here is just not okay. And I think part of that is another reason why Rozenstruik's going to be going in there and throwing everything he can in the first couple rounds. And if that doesn't stick, he's going to do it at the end of the 5th round again. But in the meantime, Volkov's going to continue to put on the volume that he always does. And I think he's going to be able to win the middle rounds no matter what and take this fight by decision. So in the end, I think I agree with you. Volkov by decision is the most likely outcome here. And now that we've discussed the 6 main fights on this UFC Vegas 56 card, I'm going to go through the main best bets for Moneyline MMA. But before that, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and follow us over on Twitter at Moneyline MMA. We continuously post our bets for those fights on Saturdays before the fights start. And we have been tracking our picks. And so far, we are 4-1 on our locks of the week. So continue to follow us and listen in on what we've got to say because we are putting out winning bets. That being said, our first best bet of the week for this card is going to be Herrig versus Kowalkiewicz going the distance. This is something that a lot of the betting public is seeing coming, and it's due to that, it's sitting at a minus 345. So you are not getting quite the returns, but even with that low return, I think this is still a bet to keep in your arsenal as one of the more safe, easy return bets on this card. In fact, I would lean Kowalkiewicz on this fight, and if you want to kind of double up with Kowalkiewicz and actually being the plus 108 underdog in this fight, you can push that up to plus 166, betting Kowalkiewicz the distance. The next best bet for Moneyline MMA on this card is going to be Almeida, based on his weigh-ins. Just wanted to make sure that he looks good, didn't struggle too much with that weight cut. He's sitting at a plus 200 underdog. I think that's insanely good value, especially to bet as a single individual bet. The third best bet of the week, we're going to go Evloev by decision. Obviously, Evloev is a very heavy favorite on this card. So instead of just picking him by money line, let's go a little bit more specific and let's go by decision. You can get minus 150 on that bet over at FanDuel. The fourth and final best bet for this card, we've got Silva by submission. This is another one that might be a close fight, but in the end, she's just so good at pushing forward and continuing to get fights to the ground as she wants. And the odds kind of show that with her being a minus 122 return on that Silva by submission bet. Our underdog of the week, Moneyline MMA, is going to be Lucas Almeida. I know I've mentioned before the concern about his weigh-ins, but we are confident here that he is going to win this fight, and therefore he's our underdog of the week. Our lock of the week, as tempting as it is, I really, of course, want to go Evloev's direction. I don't like picking the favorite, the best, biggest favorite on each card. It just seems kind of like a gimme, an easy way out of the lock. So we're not taking the biggest favorite on this card. We're going with Silva. She will get that submission, as our previous best bet states. And to finish off with our best bet section, I'm going to list some parlays endorsed by Moneyline MMA. Our low end, low risk parlay is going to be Evloev plus Silva plus Menifield. And on FanDuel, you can get that at plus 251. Very simple, straightforward, all favorites. Let's add in, for the medium level parlay, let's add in one fella in there. Let's go Evloev, Silva, Menifield, and Volkov. And with adding in the main event favorite there, you can get plus 463 on that 4-leg parlay at FanDuel. But let's crank it up a little bit. Let's go a little bit harder on this one. And let's go with the high level, high risk parlay here. We're going to go Evloev plus Silva plus Menifield plus Volkov. And let's add in the one underdog of the week that we previously mentioned, Lucas Almeida. He is going to give us plus 1,590 returns on this 5-leg parlay. That is a great return for a parlay. You're only putting one underdog in, and I think it has really high odds to succeed. So those are our 3 parlays of the week and our bets of the week. Again, follow us at Moneyline MMA on Twitter and subscribe. Ring the bell on YouTube. We're going to continue to put out videos every week that there are UFC fights. So go ahead and follow us and let us know in a comment below if you have any suggestion or feedback for us. Have a good week, guys.